Shana Tova. Today is the anniversary of creation, Hayom Harat Olam. And so in honor, am I loud enough? Okay, thanks. In honor of our wondrous planet, I'd like to tell you today the story of the Hula Valley. And I'll also be taking you through three very different versions of the creation story. Hula is in the north of Israel, just east of the Golan. How many people have been there? See a number. Have you been there during the bird migration season? Just a couple. That's the time to go. Not long ago, much of the valley was filled with a lake. It was called Lake Hula. In winter, it's about 9 feet deep. In summer, about 5 feet. And for ancient peoples, this lake was an important junction on the trade routes connecting Damascus to Egypt and the Mediterranean coast. Now, Damascus to Egypt is over 500 miles. So if you think in the days before cars and airplanes, that was a long way. What a relief to be able to stop at the lake, fill your skins from Hula's water, have a dinner of fresh fish or duck caught that day out on the lake. Lake Hula was also a critical rest stop for traveling birds. Twice a year, in the fall and the spring, they flocked there en route between Europe and Asia and Africa. During the day, the skies were filled with big seabirds like cranes and storks and pelicans. But more birds fly at night, especially the small ones who need to be cautious about predators. One example is the willow warbler. Tiny little bird. It weighs about as much as one of those packets of ketchup that you get at a fast food place. Its nesting grounds are way up north in Siberia, and it winters down in Africa south of the Sahara. That's 7,500 miles each way. Now that's a long trip without a car or an airplane. What a relief to be able to rest a day in the Hula Valley, to take a long drink from the lake and catch some of the insects that live by the water. But the lake took up a lot of farmland, potential farmland, and it also attracted mosquitoes who brought malaria. In the late 19th century, locals tried to drain some of the water. Later, Turkey and then eventually England planned much larger scale drainage projects that never got off the ground. It took Israeli ingenuity to finally make it happen. The Jewish state was born in 1948. 2 years later, they got started on the Hula drainage project, and it was a classic Israeli success story. Drain the swamp, tame the wilderness, make the land our own, and we did it. I say we, I wasn't born yet, but I'm a Zionist, so it's my story too. In 1958, the project was completed. Hula was an agricultural center, and it gave much needed food for Israel's booming population. The water that was diverted from the lake also helped boost the country's water supply, not a small deal. And malaria, gone. The Chalutzim, Israel's pioneers who drained the swamps in the north and made the deserts bloom in the south, they fill the archetype of the very first story in the Torah. The world began in chaos, tohu vavohu, and then in step by orderly step, God shaped the chaos. Light separated from darkness, the wild waters organized into sky and ocean, each type of species created in its place, and at the pinnacle of creation, humanity, created in the image of God and commanded to continue God's work, subdue the savage land and all of its creatures. Vayivarech otam Elohim, God blessed them. Vayomer lahem Elohim, God said to them, Pru urvu umilu et haaretz v'kivshuha, be fertile and multiply, fill the land and conquer it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all living things that creep on earth. And that's what we've done. Not just Israelis, of course, all of humanity. Pru urvu, we have been fertile and multiplied. Our numbers are expected to reach 8 billion by November of this year. Umilu et haaretz v'kifshua. We have filled the land and we have conquered it. Our roads crisscross the planet. There's almost no place on earth we cannot go. We are not limited anymore by the cycles of sunrise and sunset. We make our own lights and they fill the skies. Urdu bechol chaya. We rule all living things that creep on earth. We've driven out the predators that threaten us, and we've favored the species that bring us comfort. Did you know that humans and our livestock between us make up 96% of the biomass of all mammals on the planet? 96%. Throughout the first chapter of Genesis, God is referred to only as Elohim, a name which the rabbis connected to the more austere, unyielding side of God. And we, created in this image, have dominion over our planet. We drain lakes to create farmland. We create and reshape mountains for quarries and roads and ski hills. We move rivers, we destroy, and we plant entire forests. But there's a second version of the creation story right there in the Torah, Genesis chapter 2. In this story, the tetragrammaton, Yud, He, Vav, He, joins the name Elohim. The tetragrammaton can't be pronounced. We usually read it as either Adonai or Hashem. And the rabbis associated this name with the more giving side of God. In Genesis 2, Hashem seems more like a farmer or a midwife than a Lord and master. He dug in the dirt to create Adam. He breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. He created Eve from the messy flesh of Adam's own body, and he placed Adam and Eve in a plentiful garden. He did not tell them to conquer or master it, but rather, le'avda u'le'shamra, work it and protect it. If we have fulfilled God's commandment to humanity in chapter 1 of Genesis, we have failed the commandment of chapter 2. We didn't know how to both subdue the land and protect it. Draining Lake Hula had consequences that seem obvious now, but not many people were thinking about it in the 1950s. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the valley was beset by both fires and floods. Microbial growth burst out of control, poisoning the entire region with too many nitrates. Field mice became a huge nuisance to farmers, while 119 native animal species were lost to the region, and many local plant species went extinct. And those amazing migratory birds, they were no longer seen in Israel's skies. But it's not just Israel, of course. Ornithologists everywhere feel they are racing against time to save numerous species from going over the edge. Lakeside real estate has many human uses, none of which make for good layover spots for little warblers. Other birds have evolved to fly directly over the oceans without stopping. A bar-tailed godwit holds the world record that's been recorded as flying 239 days in the air without a rest. These birds have to contend with changing weather patterns as the climate changes. Artificial lights throw off many birds' navigation abilities who rely on the stars to guide them. Even our noise is a problem. In 2012, on an isolated ridge in Idaho, ecologist Jesse Barber and colleagues set up loudspeakers to play the sounds of passing cars. They called it a phantom road because there was nothing actually there, it was just noise. And that was enough to very seriously disrupt the birds who normally lay over on that ridge. Since then, hundreds of experiments have shown that traffic noise harms all kinds of species, from prairie dogs to insects. But roads have been one of our most powerful tools to contain the planet. 83% of the land in the contiguous United States is within, at most, a kilometer of a road. So where are the wild animals to go? I spoke recently to Professor Liz Hadley, an ecologist at Stanford. Liz said to me something remarkable. Humans evolved amidst nature, surrounded by nature. Now, nature is embedded in humanity. Embedded in humanity. Liz is contributing to the efforts of a working group of scientists who are preparing a case for the International Commission on Stratigraphy to officially acknowledge a new geological epoch. So you may have learned that we're now in the Holocene. That's the geological epoch that began 11,650 years ago with the end of the last ice age. But these scientists argue that the Holocene ended at about 1950, when humans began to leave an imprint on the planet that will remain in the geological record for hundreds of thousands of years to come. We have begun a new epoch, they say, the Anthropocene. Anthro as in anthropology, the epoch of humanity. And there is no going back. For me, coming to terms with this realization has been a lot like coming to terms with the aging of my own body. I will never again be able to read those little dots on the Hebrew text without help of reading glasses. It's funny, but it also causes me pain. My memory will never be as sharp as it was. My back will never be as strong. These are truths that are hard to accept. It's even harder to accept that we will never be able to undo much of the damage that we have caused on planet Earth. The coral reefs, they will never return to their past glory. Liz told me that many forests that have been destroyed, not all of them, but many, are growing back as shrubland. They'll have a different kind of beauty. We will never be able to clean the land and the sea of all the toxins that seep from our plastics and spew from our factories and oil refineries, toxins that are changing the biochemistry of nearly every species on Earth. As we grow old, most of us mourn our lost youth. We need to feel that grief. As Batya said so eloquently, we need to cry. We need to admit the sorrow, because we need to, in order to move from grief to acceptance, and then ultimately from acceptance to joy in the wisdom of our years, so too, we have to allow ourselves to mourn what has been lost on our planet. If we don't grieve, we cannot reach that acceptance. And without acceptance, we cannot move to action. That's teshuvah. It's what the high holidays are all about. Ashamnu, we have sinned. We must admit that we cannot undo the changes we've made. We cannot even stop further changes from happening, but we do have choices. Choices about how much change continues to happen and how fast and what kinds of change. We have to recognize the truth of Genesis 1. We are the master species. We have to own the power, and we have to use it to fulfill the role offered to us in Genesis 2, to become stewards of the planet. Our tradition offers one more creation story, the Kabbalist view of creation. In the beginning, before there was a world, before there was chaos, everything was one, a great, unending, indivisible light, the Ein Sof. But oneness does not allow for change or creation. So the Ein Sof somehow contracted itself to make space for the world. Now, instead of one, there were two. the light and the dark. And tendrils of that great light pushed into the darkness, and vessels formed to contain the light and shape it into a world. But the light was too great for the vessels, and they shattered, and shards of vessels and sparks of light flew all over the universe, and the breakage brought evil and chaos into the world. And it is the designated role of humanity, and especially the Jewish people, to repair the world. Tikkun olam. With every mitzvah we perform, we gather up a spark of divine light and return it to its source. This version of the creation story was formulated in the 16th century by Rabbi Isaac Luria, also known as the Ari. It was a time when Jews were hopeless, powerless against enormous violent forces, and the Ari gave our people hope. You cannot stop the Inquisition. You cannot stop the expulsions and the daily instabilities of life, but you have great power, because with each mitzvah you do, you help repair the universe. I asked Professor Hadley, what gives her hope? I was expecting to hear about big actions by big players. She said, what gives me hope is the number of people now who really care. So I shared with her something I had heard in a Shabbat sermon from Rabbi Ezra. He was quoting a person named Anne-Marie Bono, who was an advocate for reducing our use of plastic. And plastics, by the way, are causing terrible damage, and we all use them. When I think about the prevalence of plastic in my life, it often leaves me feeling hopeless. But Bono said, quote, we don't need a few conservationists doing a perfect job. We need many conservationists doing an imperfect job. And Liz agrees. She said to me, we need change from bottom up. The kind of change, by the way, that CBJ's Environmental Committee is working towards, and I hope everyone in the room will come to our event on Sukkot. You'll hear from 3 CBJ members who are making significant bottom-up kinds of differences. You'll come away inspired with things you yourself can do. But Liz also said, we also need change from top down. And she didn't give an example, but what came into my mind was the impact of our statewide referendum on single-use shopping bags. The moral imperative was not enough to break most of us of our disposable bag habit. It took a 10-cent surcharge to get us to bring our reusable bags to the store. So bottom up or top down, we need everything we have to cultivate a tikkun olam mindset. Every time you choose a reusable bag or a disposable bottle, it's not just one piece of plastic you've saved. Every time you walk or bike or even take the bus instead of driving, it's not just a few gallons of gas. It's a spark of divine light returned to its source. And with each of us gathering as many sparks as we can, all of us working together, it will soon become millions and billions of lights restored. We can nudge our planet away from chaos. We can shape a future on Earth to sustain generations to come. In the 1980s, the Jewish National Fund stepped up to look at what had happened in the Hula Valley. And they created an ambitious compromise between agriculture and stewardship, between le'avda, to work it, and l'shomra, to protect it. They didn't try to restore Lake Hula. They created a much smaller new Lake Agmon near the southern edge of where Lake Hula once stood. And much of the valley most of the valley is still farmland. It's a complex system of pumps and filters that helps manage the water table now. But around Lake Agmon, plant species that had been lost were reintroduced, and others returned on their own. And best of all, the birds came back. Today, Hundreds of millions of birds pass through Israel every fall and spring, filling the skies and the Hula Valley. It's not a coincidence that the project to drain Lake Hula began in 1951, right at the time that scientists now recognize as the dawn of the Anthropocene. Back then, we had power, but not knowledge. And that's a dangerous combination. Plastics were this amazing miracle of a science that enabled us to do more, be more. Automobiles gave us freedom to go, go, go. And who had even heard of light pollution or noise pollution without any of that knowledge? How can we have been expected to both subdue the planet and protect it? But now we know better. And with knowledge comes an even greater power, the power of stewardship. The Anthropocene is the epic of humanity. We are the masters. Truly, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, we control the planet. And it is on us to shape a planet Earth that we will still want to inhabit for ourselves and for our children's children's children. We have the power of Tikkun Olam. Bit by bit, each of us contributing, together we can reclaim the garden. I know we can do it. Shana Tova.
Shakoach. This is true.